This revenge story contains intense acts of retribution that may be excessive and could be disturbing to some viewers.
I never thought much about the house at first. It was just there. A two-story colonial painted a dull beige, sitting on a quiet street in some suburb we'd never heard of until our realtor, a woman named Brenda with a smile that could curdle milk, showed us around. Spacious, she'd said, her voice all honey and fake enthusiasm. Affordable. That's what sold us. Me, anyway. Audrey seemed more interested in the walk-in closet. We needed a fresh start, she'd said. A place to grow. I thought a fresh coat of paint would be enough. We signed the papers, packed the boxes, and moved in. Day one was chaos, all unpacked boxes and half-eaten pizza. By the end of the week, things felt almost normal. Almost. Then, the letters started. The first one arrived a week after we settled in, slid under the front door like a stray bill. I picked it up, expecting junk mail or some welcome to the neighborhood flyer. It was neither. A single sheet of cheap lined paper. The message was stark, almost crude, written in what looked like dried blood. Be suspicious of your wife's actions. My heart did a weird flip. I looked around, half expecting to see someone watching from the street, a kid pulling a prank. But the street was empty, the houses silent, almost too silent. I crumpled it up, threw it in the trash. Some sick joke, I muttered to myself, trying to shake off the unease that had suddenly settled on me. But then, every time Audrey left for one of her charity events, another letter would appear. Same cheap paper, same eerie red ink, same bone-chilling message. Be suspicious of your wife's actions. It was like a broken record, a twisted kind of ritual. The letters always arrived after she left, like clockwork. Audrey's been spending more and more time at these things. She says it's networking, a chance to get involved in the community. Her eyes would light up when she talked about them, about the galas, the fundraisers. She'd come home late, smelling of perfume and someone else's scotch. At first, I bought it. I wanted to buy it. She'd always been ambitious, driven. Why would I doubt her? I tried to rationalize it, to convince myself that she was doing this for us, for our future. But the letters started to gnaw at me, like termites in the woodwork. Who was sending them? Why? The house itself felt off too, like it had a secret, something hidden under the floorboards. At night, I'd hear faint footsteps in the hallway, a light patter, even though Audrey was asleep next to me. The air would grow cold in certain rooms, a sudden drop like walking into a freezer. Sometimes I'd catch a whiff of something metallic, like blood, a sickly sweet smell that made my stomach churn. Just your imagination, I told myself. You are just tired. But deep down, a knot was forming in my gut, a cold dread. I started to feel like I was being watched, like the house itself was alive, listening to every move I made, every thought I had. The house was whispering things I didn't want to hear. And they were all about Audrey. One evening, after Audrey left for another one of her charity events, she'd kissed me on the cheek, her lips cool and distant, and said something about a gala. I decided I couldn't just sit around, waiting for the next letter to arrive. I needed answers. I pulled up the county's online records, typed in our address, hoping for some detail, anything that would explain what was happening. Old permits, maybe? I found nothing useful at first, just the usual legal jargon, ownership history. And then, there it was, buried in the search results, an old newspaper article. The headline jumped out at me. Local man found dead in apparent domestic dispute. My pulse quickened as I clicked on the link. The article was dated over 20 years ago. It told a grim tale. A man named Thomas had lived here with his wife, Sarah. He'd been a school teacher, apparently. Quiet, unassuming. But Sarah, according to the article, had been restless. Thomas had come home one night to find her with another man, a neighbor, the article said. A man he'd considered a friend. The confrontation, the article continued, had been explosive. Sarah, it said, had stabbed him. She'd used a kitchen knife. Right here in this house. Thomas died on the living room floor. It was messy, the article noted with a detached, almost clinical tone. The house had been vacant for years after that, passed from bank to bank, real estate company to real estate company. Rumors had swirled, the article concluded, whispering of Thomas's ghost, a restless spirit still wandering the halls. A chill, colder than any I'd felt in the house, ran down my spine. The metallic smell, the cold spots, the footsteps, it was all making a horrifying kind of sense. Was it possible? Could Thomas's ghost be trying to warn me about Audrey? The letters, the timing, it all felt too coincidental. I stared at the newspaper article, the words blurring before my eyes. The details, the specific way he died, the domestic conflict, it all felt too close to what I was experiencing. I felt like I was trapped in some macabre parallel to Thomas's past. I couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was watching me, observing my every move from the shadows. That night I didn't sleep. Instead, I laid awake, every creak of the house amplified in the silence, waiting for Audrey to come home. I dreamed of Thomas. He wasn't a ghost of wispy smoke and ethereal light. He stood at the foot of our bed, solid, real, his face pale and drawn, his shirt stained with a dark, crusty substance, a grotesque memento of his death. The blood was almost black, a stark contrast to the white of his shirt. He didn't speak, not with words, but his eyes bored into mine, filled with a mix of anger and pity. I could feel the weight of his stare, the intensity of his pain. When I woke up, the room was freezing, the air biting against my skin. The faint smell of blood lingered, a phantom scent that clung to the room like a bad dream. I sat up, my heart pounding in my chest, and looked around, half expecting to see him standing there, but there was nothing. Just the early morning light streaming through the window, casting long, distorted shadows across the room. I felt a sudden urge to pack my bags, to run as far away from the house as possible. But then, I remembered the letters. Thomas wasn't just trying to scare me. He was trying to tell me something. He was trying to protect me from the same fate that had befallen him, and I felt with chilling certainty I needed to listen. I started paying closer attention to Audrey. It was like a switch had been flipped. The trust, the easy comfort that had been there was gone. Now, I saw everything through a new lens, a lens tinted with suspicion and fear. She'd come home later and later from these events, her phone buzzing constantly with notifications. She'd clutch it tight, angling it away from me, her eyes flicking to the screen with a nervous energy I'd never noticed before. One night, while she was in the shower, the water drumming a steady rhythm against the tile, I checked her phone. It felt wrong, intrusive, like violating some unspoken agreement, but I had to know. The letters, the ghost, the growing dread, it was all too much. My stomach dropped as I scrolled through the messages. They were from a man named Michael, a wealthy local businessman, the organizer of those charity events. He was always in the background of the photos she would casually show me, a tall, dark, handsome guy with a smile that looked too practiced. The messages were explicit. There were pet names, promises of secret rendezvous, details about stolen moments, things that made my blood boil and my hands tremble. They were undeniable proof of an affair. My wife, my Audrey, was sleeping with another man. I felt a mix of rage and despair, a crushing sense of betrayal that left me breathless. The anger was a physical thing, a burning heat behind my eyes, a tightness in my chest that made it hard to breathe. But then I remembered the letters, those stark, bloody warnings. Was this what Thomas's ghost wanted me to see? Was he guiding me, nudging me towards this horrifying truth, like some puppet master pulling the strings? The idea was unsettling, unnerving, but I couldn't ignore the eerie coincidences. It felt like I was playing a role in some twisted tragedy, the next act in Thomas's story of betrayal and violence. I decided to act, to take back some control. I wouldn't let myself be a victim, another forgotten footnote in the house's dark history. I began gathering evidence. I scrolled through Audrey's phone again, screenshotting the messages, saving the photos of Michael. I found their text conversations, explicit and sickening, saved them on my laptop. They were planning a trip, a weekend getaway, a romantic escape. Audrey's words. I needed more, though. This evidence, it wouldn't feel enough. I wanted to expose them, to show the world what they were doing, to make them feel the same shame and humiliation that was eating away at me. I bought a set of hidden cameras, small enough to be tucked away unnoticed. I placed them around the house, in the living room, the kitchen, the bedroom, even the hallway. It felt like a dirty, underhanded tactic, but I didn't care. I was beyond caring. I also started to follow Audrey when she left for her charity events. I would park down the street, watching as she walked to her car, her steps hurried and secretive, like she had some illicit appointment to keep. I saw her meet Michael at a small cafe, the way they looked at each other, touched each other. They had the look of guilty lovers, not like people who were simply networking. It didn't take long to catch them together. Not really. It was almost too easy. I followed them to a hotel, a dingy place on the outskirts of town, the type of place they went to keep their affair hidden. The footage I got was damning. They were kissing, whispering, laughing, everything a betrayed husband doesn't want to see. The intimacy was sickening, the ease with which they betrayed me a kind of twisted dagger. I had the evidence, the undeniable proof of their affair, but it wasn't enough. I wanted to do more than confront her, more than just walk away. I wanted to punish them, to destroy them both, publicly and completely. I wanted to make them feel the same pain I was feeling, a pain that was now an unshakable presence in my life, like a constant ache. My plan was taking shape, and I was ready to make them pay. The annual Christmas charity gala was the biggest event of the year, the social highlight of our small, suffocatingly quaint town. Everyone who was anyone would be there. The mayor, the local business owners, the school board members, the wives in their expensive dresses and perfectly coiffed hair. Michael, of course, was at the center of it all, the charismatic host, the man who pulled all the strings. I had seen his picture in the local paper, smiling confidently, his arm casually draped over Audrey's shoulder. It was sickening, a public display of their betrayal that had gone on unnoticed, a secret joke at my expense. I knew this gala, with its sparkling lights, its forced cheerfulness, it was my chance. My chance to unveil their charade, to expose them for what they were. The ballroom was a glittering spectacle, a sea of shimmering gowns, twinkling lights, and forced laughter. The air was thick with the cloying scent of expensive perfume and too much champagne. The band played a syrupy Christmas carol, a saccharine tune that grated against my nerves. I felt like an outsider, a ghost in a room full of the living, observing the proceedings with detached contempt. Audrey was there, of course, her arm linked with Michael's, both of them beaming, acting like nothing was wrong, like they weren't carrying around the weight of their lies. She wore a crimson dress, a color that looked like dried blood under the chandelier's light, a grim reminder of the letters and the house's dark secrets. I watched them as they circulated through the crowd, laughing and joking, completely oblivious to the storm that was about to break. I'd spent the last few days planning, preparing, making sure every detail was in place. I'd hacked into the event's AV system, bypassing their security measures. It wasn't particularly hard, just a matter of finding the right vulnerability. I downloaded the footage from my hidden cameras, edited it into a cohesive narrative, adding a title card, "The Truth Behind the Charity." The video was a damning collection of their affair, the stolen kisses, the whispered promises, the explicit messages displayed on the screen in large, bold letters. I'd made sure every incriminating detail was highlighted, nothing was left to the imagination. I wanted them to squirm, to feel the eyes of everyone in the room on them, to watch their reputations crumble into dust. As the gala reached its peak, with the mayor giving a rambling speech about the spirit of Christmas, I triggered the video. The screen, usually displaying festive images, flickered, and the footage began to play. The room fell silent, the cheerful chatter abruptly cut short. The band stopped playing mid-note. The faces in the crowd turned towards the giant screen, their expressions a mix of curiosity and confusion, which gradually morphed into shock and disgust. The video started with a clip of Audrey and Michael meeting at the hotel, followed by a series of their intimate moments. I watched as the horror dawned on their faces, their forced smiles faltering, their eyes widening with disbelief and fear. The room erupted into a cacophony of gasps, murmurs, and whispers. The festive atmosphere instantly evaporated, replaced with a palpable tension, a cold, heavy silence broken only by hushed conversations. Audrey froze, her face pale as a ghost, the color draining from her cheeks. Michael tried to bolt, to melt back into the crowd, but the crowd closed in around him like wolves circling their prey. They were trapped, cornered, their lies exposed to the world. I stood at the back of the room, my body rigid, my heart pounding in my chest, watching their lives unravel. I felt a surge of satisfaction, a dark, twisted pleasure at seeing their suffering, but it was hollow, empty, like eating a meal that had no taste. Was this really my doing, or was it Thomas's hand guiding mine, pulling the strings of this elaborate revenge plot? The question lingered in the back of my mind, a chilling reminder that I might just be a pawn in someone else's game. Audrey finally spotted me in the crowd. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, I thought she might say something, perhaps beg for forgiveness, or maybe even try to explain. But then she turned, her dress swirling around her ankles, and ran, disappearing into the night, leaving behind the ruins of her reputation. Michael wasn't so lucky. The crowd surrounded him, their voices rising in a crescendo of accusations and demands for answers. They were like a mob, hungry for blood, demanding justice for the betrayal they had just witnessed. I slipped out before anyone could connect me to the video, leaving them to deal with the fallout of their actions. The music had stopped, the lights seemed less bright, and the Christmas cheer had died, replaced by the cold, harsh reality of betrayal. I had won, but I felt like I'd lost something too. Later that night, I sat alone in the house, the silence pressing in on me, heavy and suffocating. The adrenaline from the gala had worn off, leaving behind a gnawing emptiness, a feeling of profound isolation. The lights from the Christmas decorations outside cast long, distorted shadows across the living room, making the familiar space feel alien and unsettling. I replayed the footage on my laptop, watching Audrey and Michael's downfall again and again, searching for some kind of closure, some sense of satisfaction that never seemed to arrive. The betrayal was still there, a gaping wound, a constant ache in my chest. And then I saw it. Something I hadn't noticed before, a detail hidden in the chaos, something that made my blood run cold, that made my skin crawl with a primal fear. In the corner of the screen, barely visible, a man was staring directly into the camera, a faint smile playing on his lips. The image was grainy, almost translucent, but his face was unmistakable. It was Thomas. He wasn't just a figure in the background. He was looking right at me, his eyes filled with a strange mixture of amusement and something else, something darker. It was a look that sent a shiver down my spine, a look that seemed to say, I was here all along. My hands shook as I replayed the clip again, zooming in on the corner of the screen, trying to convince myself that I was seeing things, that it was just a glitch, a trick of the light. But the more I looked, the more real he seemed, the more tangible. His face was pale, his expression almost mocking, like he was enjoying the show. I could almost feel his presence in the room, a cold, malevolent energy that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. Had he been there all along, guiding me, manipulating me, pulling the strings of my revenge? Had he been the one who wrote the letters, the one who pushed me to uncover the affair? Was I just a pawn in his game, a tool for his unfinished business? The thought was terrifying, a horrifying realization that I might not be in control of my own actions, that I had been manipulated by a ghost, a spirit seeking vengeance from beyond the grave. I tried to rationalize it, to find a logical explanation. Maybe it was a reflection, a double exposure, something that could be explained by the technical quirks of the camera. But deep down, I knew the truth. Thomas had been with me every step of the way, a silent observer, a malevolent force pushing me towards the confrontation at the gala. He had been the one whispering doubts in my ear, fueling my anger, guiding me towards the inevitable destruction of Audrey and Michael. The letters, the cold spots, the footsteps, it all made a terrifying, chilling kind of sense. It wasn't just the house that was haunted. It was me too. I felt a profound sense of unease, a feeling that I had crossed a line, that I had entered into some kind of pact with the supernatural. I had gotten my revenge. I had seen my enemies suffer, but it had come at a cost that I was only beginning to understand. The house felt different now, more oppressive, more alive. It was like Thomas had moved in, had claimed a space in my life, a permanent, unwelcome presence that I could never escape. The air was colder, the shadows deeper, and the scent of blood, faint and metallic, was stronger, more persistent. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that Thomas was still there, observing my every move, savoring my discomfort. I turned off the laptop. The image of his mocking smile burned into my memory. I tried to distract myself, to find some kind of normalcy, but the house felt too heavy, the silence too loud, the presence of the ghost too real. I knew that I would never truly be alone again. Not in this house. Not with Thomas's ghost still lurking in the shadows, smiling his knowing smile, reminding me that revenge comes at a price that I would continue to pay for as long as I lived. Audrey and I divorced soon after the gala. The proceedings were messy, bitter, a final, agonizing battle in our broken marriage. She tried to apologize, her voice trembling, her eyes filled with a strange mixture of regret and defiance, but I couldn't forgive her. The betrayal was too deep, the wound too raw. I couldn't look at her without seeing the images from the video, without feeling the icy grip of her deception. She tried to explain, to rationalize her actions, but the words fell flat, hollow and meaningless. There was nothing left for us, nothing but the lingering bitterness of a love that had turned to ash. She left town shortly after, disappearing from my life as quickly as she had entered it. Michael's reputation was ruined. The scandal became the talk of the town, a juicy piece of gossip that was endlessly dissected and debated. His business suffered, his social standing crumbled, and he became an outcast, a pariah in the community that he had once dominated. He left town shortly after, his tail between his legs, his career in tatters, another casualty of the gala. He became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the price of deceit, a whispered legend that served to both shock and entertain. As for me, I stayed in the house. Everyone told me to leave, to move on, to start a new life somewhere else, but I couldn't. I felt bound to it, tied to the ghost and the dark secrets buried within its walls. The letters stopped, the bloody warnings no longer sliding under the door, but I still felt Thomas's presence. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of him in the corner of my eye, a fleeting shadow, a distortion in the periphery of my vision. Other times, I'd hear the faint, almost silent, footsteps in the empty hallway, a soft, rhythmic patter that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. The cold spots remained, sudden pockets of icy air that chilled me to the bone, and the metallic scent of blood would linger, a phantom smell that clung to the house like a curse. I often wonder if I was the one who sought revenge, or if Thomas used me, manipulated me to finish what he started. Was I a willing participant in his macabre plan, or just a puppet dancing on his strings? I couldn't tell anymore. The line between my own actions and his influence had become blurred, almost indistinguishable. I was trapped in a cycle of resentment and regret, a prisoner of the past and the supernatural. The house had become a tomb, a constant reminder of my betrayal and my descent into darkness. I've tried to find peace, to reconcile with what happened, but I can't. The events of that Christmas gala are etched into my mind, a constant, unwelcome reminder of my own actions, and the chilling truth that I wasn't alone in my quest for revenge. I am stuck with him now, with Thomas, his presence a constant weight, a reminder of the darkness that now resides in this house, and in me. I feel him in the shadows, in the cold spots, in the silence that surrounds me. I become a part of this house's story, a new chapter in its dark, haunting history. As I sit by the window, staring out at the quiet street, the same quiet street that had seemed so peaceful when we first moved in, I see his reflection in the glass. He's standing behind me, just a faint, almost transparent image in the glass. But his face is clear. He's still smiling, his eyes fixed on me, and that's when I know I'll never truly be free.